Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. This episode is brought to you by IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT teams. Why is it binge-worthy? It's learning presented in an engaging and entertaining talk show format that beats voice-over PowerPoint snooze fests. IT Pro TV offers an on-demand course library with more than 3,300 hours of content. Watch on your desktop, on the go, or in the comfort of your own living room. IT Pro TV is IT training you and your team actually want to watch, which means a better return on your learning investment. Get started with IT Pro TV for Teams with a special offer for Security Weekly listeners. Visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly to start a 7-day free trial and get 30% off a standard or premium IT Pro TV membership using the code SECWeekly30.
And we're back. I tell you, this is a comfy chair. I think I could get used to this.
Michael, the announcement's IT Pro TV. I know we just talked about.
I can't read from this angle.
Oh, but you don't need to read it.
Okay,
come on, you're Michael.
We've done this a couple times, right?
I need you to communicate to
our
listeners.
I have to translate it into value. That was a blast, actually, talking to Adam. I mean, like when you look at IT Pro TV. There's so much stuff there. Think about everything we just talked about, and then, go apply that in your lab. I like he's right.
Well, and think about there's Adam and people like Adam that are the instructors for IT Pro TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's really that should be the whole announcement. That's it's awesome.
Game set match.
Yeah.
Is that no InfoSec knows the next segment, isn't it? Is it? Okay. I'm arguing with the voices for those listeners that can't. I keep forgetting.
You're looking at me and talking to the voices in your head.
It's the voices in my head. I was just having an argument with them, and I think I won. So
it's Thanksgiving incident all over.
There you
again,
go. We're not talking about the Thanksgiving incident.
The second rule is we don't talk about it.
Rebekah Brown from Rapid7 is here with us tonight. Rebekah, welcome to Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Rebekah, happy birthday, by the way. I hope you're okay with the security community at large knowing that it's your birthday.
I thought it was January 1st.
It is.
It's always.
Well, I had to go a couple weeks later just to throw everybody off, so they thought it was.
That's good.
It's good. Perfect.
Now, Rebekah, let's start with how did you get your start in information security?
I actually had a very weird and winding path here. I started out as a Chinese cryptologic linguist in the Marine Corps. And even that was an accident. I think I was supposed to have learned Korean, and someone typed the job code wrong, and they sent me to Chinese school. And so I graduated, did great, top of my class, and they were like, what in the world are we going to do with her? So I ended up basically being on loan on detail to NSA for a lot of years, learning intelligence and cryptology, a lot of different aspects of it. Until finally they realized, like, oh my gosh, our networks are getting hammered. We think it might be the Chinese. And we have this one girl who speaks Chinese, like, bring her back. So I got kind of thrown into information security at that point. I went through kind of an immersion course in learning network security and learning network attacks and defense. And I loved it. It was kind of, I was worried when I first started because I love Chinese and I love doing intelligence work. And then when they said, you're going to learn computers, I was like, well, how am I going to possibly love that as much? But I did. Being able to look for patterns and look for attacks and understand the motivations of adversaries and why they were doing what they were doing was really, really fascinating. And I've been kind of merging all of my different trades ever since.
It's awesome they had you more than doing just more than translation of all the documentation from all the fun toys that we get, because all of my stuff's in Chinese and I still can't read it.
I still get a lot of that. I get a lot of
no.
What is this?
I have a quick question as well. So, Rebekah, you mentioned cryptology. For me personally, I really don't know the answer to this question, but what is the difference between cryptography and cryptology?
All right, and I always get these mixed up. So let me And so these might be reversed. So if anybody's out there chatting in and I get these mixed up, let me know. But cryptography is creating codes, writing codes, and cryptology is breaking them. And I think I got those reversed now that I think about it. But yeah, one of them is creating and one is kind of understanding and breaking them.
I thought cryptography was creating maps. Is that?
Cartography.
Oh,
cartography.
Cartography.
It's all the same.
But that makes me think that cryptography is the creation
of
crypto because cartography is the crypts.
Yeah.
Of crypts.
So doing some quick Googling, because that is, the world's repository of answers, you're actually right. As far as I can tell, it says cryptology is the study of codes, whereas I imagine cryptography is the creation of. So based on Google, you're right.
There you go.
Thank God.
Rebekah,
the Oracle has spoken.
What is your role at Rapid7 today?
So I run our threat intelligence program, which is pretty diverse and pretty widespread. We have a bunch of different areas where we can generate intelligence through things like understanding vulnerabilities, doing a lot of our research. We have a couple of different projects that our Rapid7 Labs runs where we do our internet scanning, and we have HoneyNet projects. And then kind of taking all that we're learning about how to identify attackers and identify new techniques and building that into the tools we use for those detection methodologies. And then I also work a lot with our services team, helping them understand the threat profile for different industries and different customers and making sure that we are actually applying security smartly. I was listening to the last interview with Adam, and there was a lot of talk about how we need to make sure everything's secure and locked down. But the truth for a lot of these businesses is they will not do that unless they actually understand the threat they're facing. And so our goal is to identify what is actually presenting a threat to them, what could impact their business, what could impact their operations, and then helping them understand why they need to make certain changes.
When you do that, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to go back to something, and I know
it's probably the same question.
I know where you're going. I want to go someplace different first. I know where Michael's going because we share a brain. Larry and I kind of share a brain. But so you said you scan the internet. Do people get mad when you scan them?
Sometimes. Sometimes they get mad. Sometimes they just reach out and be like, "What's going on? What are you doing?" If anybody ever says, "Hey, stop scanning me," then we absolutely respect that. But no, there's a lot of people, and honestly, when people notice that we're doing it, reach out to us. That's actually really promising because it means people are paying attention. And a lot of times when we understand what's going on, or when we explain what's going on, they either say, "Hey, great, don't do it anymore," or let us keep carrying on. But it's actually been really good because when we have found a lot of these internet-facing vulnerabilities. And we can reach out. We've done this scanning. We've been doing it for years and years and years. And so being able to identify, if we see somebody has, open ports that they shouldn't, or that they're vulnerable to a certain attack that we know is running rampant, like WannaCry, for example, we can reach out and say, "Hey, we can see you are vulnerable on these systems," and give them a heads up. So it's very, very useful research.
That's awesome. Michael,
I love that part. No, it's okay. The thing I always wonder, and so I'm just curious where you've had success. You talked about when they understand the threat, they're willing to take an action. Aside from the obvious, like, well, how do you do that? How do you get their attention? Because I've got to think they're so used to having everybody say, "Listen to me, this is important. Listen, I'll explain it. I'll make it make sense." But like that first step, like, how do you even get them to take a minute to listen?
Well, a lot of the times we're working with people who have reached out to us, so they have at least some interest.
Okay, so they at least started it.
They did. But what actually is good is to not start the conversation with, "Listen to me, the internet's on fire and we're all going to die." But talk to them. Ask them, "Hey, what are you concerned about? You know your business, your operations better than I do. I know the security side and I can tell you where, what's important to your business. There might be a threat against it." But actually having a conversation and not just immediately, talking about everything they've done wrong and all the ways they're going to get hacked. People are a lot more receptive. And then when you do identify something that you think is legitimately putting them at risk, they feel like, okay, well, they understand what we're doing. They know what's important. They wouldn't just be telling us this for no reason. It doesn't always work, but it does work a lot better than other approaches I've seen.
Rebekah,
so much yes.
What's some of the most interesting research or things that you've discovered in the various aspects of threat intelligence that you work on today at Rapid7?
Oh, goodness. Probably one of the most interesting things that we've been working on lately is the time to exploitation. Like when we discover a new vulnerability, or somebody discovers that, hey, there's this vulnerability that we see somebody exploiting for a very targeted espionage-based purpose. Once that all becomes public, how quickly it becomes weaponized by other adversaries. We saw this a lot with the Apache Struts vulnerabilities that were announced last year. Those are very easy to exploit. A lot of the systems, there were tons of systems online that were vulnerable, and so we're kind of looking at the conditions that what would make it really, I guess, possible for that quick exploitation, and trying to, because that helps us gauge the risk. It helps us gauge how we need to push for remediation, because there are so many vulnerabilities, there are so many, attacks that are identified. We can't just tell people just fix them all right now, because that's impossible from a business standpoint. And so doing that kind of research to realize, like, okay, the conditions are right, you need to focus on this one, or, hey, you should definitely address it, but take time to do the testing, take time to make sure that you're rolling things out smartly. Knowing when it's going to be one or the other has been kind of a focus of ours lately.
Rebekah, how much do you do you speak, write, and read Chinese?
I do. My writing has gotten a little rusty.
Yeah, I can imagine that must be a skill that you have to keep up on for sure.
Use it or lose it.
Yeah. So, how much do you use that today?
So, I don't use it a ton. I don't use it as much as I used to. I like to read security blogs and security papers in Chinese. Translation is really, really hard. And so being able to kind of get the nuance by knowing the language, I think helps me better understand some of the things that are kind of written in native language. They actually have some really good security blogs out there. Some of them don't get translated. Some of them get Google translated, which are really, really confusing to read. But I like doing that. I actually wish I spoke more languages or read more languages so I could do that in other areas as well.
Don't you wish you were doing Korean right now?
That would be interesting. It would actually be really, really interesting. The North Korea attacks that have been in the news lately have kind of thrown a loop in some of the assumptions we have in threat intelligence about, where the line is between criminal activity and nation state activity. We like to think that, financially motivated, hackers do this and nation state ones do this. And North Korea is just blurring all that up for us.
Interesting. More questions for Rebekah.
There's always those stories you hear that you wonder how much truth to them there are, and I've heard the stories that so much of the cyber threat, I just use the word, cyber threat from North Korea, actually originates out of China, and I really wonder how true some of that is. Not that I expect you to have an answer on it.
So, runs through Chinese IP addresses, or actually comes from China and they blame it on North Korea?
Yes, because that question is multifaceted, isn't it? And there's more than one possible answer, and there's likely also more than one possible answer depending on any given case.
No, absolutely, and that actually, I'm not sure if anybody has published any good research on that. But that would be, it would make sense given kind of the limited bandwidth North Korea has available to them, that they would have to go through somewhere else to do it. All the other ties, actually that's one of the things I love about threat intelligence is it's so multifaceted. You'd have to go back and look at relations between China and North Korea and the history, and to kind of understand that question of how much is going on between the two countries there.
Covering the news for as long as we have, Rebekah, I think that maybe 5 years ago, everyone was all about China. Everyone's like, China's hacking us. Right. This was a Chinese nation state attack. Chinese hackers did this. It seems like now we talk more about North Korea and Russia than we do China. Is that true, first of all? And if so, what are your speculations as to what the reasons would be for that?
So it is true, at least from what we're hearing about perspective. It used to be, APT is, slang for it's China. And now everybody says, well, if you're getting hacked, it's Russia. And yeah, I think there's a couple different reasons for that. 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago, I think the APT1 report came out, and that kind of blew the cover off of a lot of things that China was doing. And it wasn't just the technical details. It wasn't just, signatures for their tools and IP addresses for their hot points and things like that. But they did a lot of good work uncovering the intent behind why China was doing what they were doing. And it's a lot easier to defend against attacks when you know what they're after and you know what types of data they're going to be going after and what's important to them. And so I think a lot of it was just that increased awareness made it harder for them to do their job. There were also some negotiations between China and the U.S. saying that, hey, we'll back off on hacking you, which is a very interesting negotiation to make. But from what I heard and from what I saw, that was actually successful, and we did see a decrease in activity as well. And I honestly, my speculation, because I focused on China during that part, I didn't focus on a lot of other areas. I was trying to figure out what they were doing. My speculation was that Russia was probably active, very active at that same point. We just weren't looking for them the way we were looking for China. And so I don't know if there's been a marked increase in Russian activity, or if it's just that we're talking about it and we're seeing it now. But there is definitely a shift.
Michael, you have a question on intent. I know you do.
No, you
glanced lovingly at me.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if that was just a general glancing lovingly at me.
I think it was intent.
Yeah. No, I think that was a really good point. I mean, you and I were talking about this the other day, right? We don't have a content problem, it's a context problem. And then we're talking about context sometimes reveals intent. But what I liked about it was that prioritization. If you understand what someone's going after, if you can get a sense of their intent, you can make better decisions. And that was like, oh, I hope people wrote that down, but we called it out. So that's
like a page right out of Never Split the Difference, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole. It's a book about hostage negotiation. I don't know if you've read it, Rebekah, but
negotiation in life.
Yeah, and negotiation in life, right? But understanding what the other person's intent is like pretty much 98, 99% of a hostage negotiation.
Yeah.
And where things have gone wrong, like, the intent was the hostage, the person taking the people hostage was basically, his intent was to get shot by the police. They couldn't get that, and he ended up dying. And so that was a huge failure and a trigger to understand intent. So how, in your opinion, Rebekah, how important is it for organizations today to understand the attacker's intent, either whether that's a specific targeted attack or not? How important is that to my security architecture today?
I think it's critical. I think that if you don't understand the intent, if you don't know what an adversary, what you have, what data you have, what access you have, that an adversary might be interested in, then you're not going to be able to protect yourself appropriately. We've very quickly realized that the whole just, build a giant wall around the castle and don't let anything in. That's not going to happen. And so you have to know what you're protecting, and you have to know where that is. I've talked to a lot of companies where they're like, oh, yeah, this is our key data. And I said, cool, where do you keep that? And they're like, oh.
On the network?
You have computers?
But the internet's in the computer.
And then the follow-up question, well, who has access to that? Oh.
Exactly.
So Rebekah, a question for you, and sort of related to that. I always used to joke with folks, and I still sort of do sometimes, is that no matter what someone's intent is for breaking into your network, that every network has at least 3 things that attackers are potentially interested in. And I don't know if that's still the case. And those 3 things are disk space, computing power, and bandwidth. At their essence. Is that sort of still true?
I think so. I think that, well, especially with cryptocurrency miners, we've been seeing so many of those lately because that's how people can make money. So they might not care at all about what's on, the system they've been able to compromise. They just, they want to use its processing power to make money. And then I would also say this maybe isn't true of every adversary, but for a lot of adversaries, they also want your access to other systems or other companies. There's a lot of third-party relationships out there, and you can, play leapfrog to get to the right networks. So it's also important to understand what you're connected to, because the adversary might just be going through you to get to somebody else.
Yep. I remember many years ago, we talked about a story, Paul, that some folks had compromised NVIDIA or something of the like. It was Logitech. And they had access to be able to actually recompile their malware into all of the Logitech mouse drivers. And Logitech, huge mouse distributor at the particular time, but they didn't realize what they had or what they could have done with it, but they were using it as a spot to be able to do distributed denial of service attacks. Like, if they had known what they had, they could have done so much more.
I have a follow-on to Larry's question. So it sounds like, Rebekah, based on the agreement between former President Obama and President Xi Jinping back on around September, October of 2015, they had that cyber agreement where, look, we were not going to do anything to your companies, you're not going to do anything to us. And it sounds like from everything that you said that the posture somewhat changed after that from the Chinese hacking side of things. At the time, and if you can recall, did it move more into kind of like that ransomware space for some of those groups in China? Because I know a lot of them were somewhat like mercenaries, right? They were hired out by the government to do certain tasks, and now suddenly their work dried up. And I'd be curious to know, in addition to that, so the first question is, did we see the attack vectors change as a result of kind of that cyber agreement? And then have we seen it change again recently with the rise of Bitcoin values, for example?
So to answer the first part of your question, I don't think we ever conclusively tied any increase in ransomware to Chinese adversaries. I know that there was definitely some, moonlighting that they would do, but China is still a pretty restrictive country. And so if they were able to identify that they had people who worked for them or were supposed to work for them who were doing other things, they probably wouldn't be too happy about that. So I guess there was probably some of that activity, but I don't think it was a huge spike. I don't think it would have, contributed to the rise in ransomware. That would be my hypothesis. I would need to kind of go gather and do some more research to fully answer that question. And the rise in I guess Bitcoin is I had a webinar yesterday where we were talking about our predictions for 2018. And basically a lot of adversaries will go where the money is. And right now the money is in cryptocurrency.
Except for yesterday.
I know. I'm pretty sure because I said that everything crashed. Sorry, everybody out there.
It's okay. I bought when it was down.
Oh. But no, so it's great because, you can, like we talked about with the cryptocurrency miners, they can actually, instead of stealing data and trying to monetize it somewhere else, they can steal that processing power to generate money for themselves. It's a really, really good medium for getting paid for things like ransomware or the DDoS ransom, where the company they'll write and say, hey, we're going to denial of service your websites unless you pay us these Bitcoins. So it's actually a really good way for them to get money. Believe it or not, probably in 2013, 2014, I was supporting state and local governments. And we would get cases where people would have ransomware, but they would literally say, send the money to this bank account, which is super, super easy to track. And so I think Bitcoin allowed them to be a lot smarter and get their money other ways. So I think cryptocurrency has contributed to, or I guess we're seeing a shift in attack patterns and attack types based on cryptocurrency. But honestly, if it didn't exist, attackers would come up with a different way. They're very clever. They'll find whatever is of value or whatever they can do at the time, and they would have focused on that.
No.
Rebekah, I feel like you know who created Bitcoin, but you just can't tell us. It's kind of.
I can't. I'm sorry.
That's what I feel like right now.
Satoshi, clearly.
I'd be really curious to know as well, Rebekah. And again, this is probably more of just your opinion than anything that's validated out by the data that you've collected at Rapid7. But I'd be curious to know, based on your years of experience in the industry, how you see cryptocurrencies in general have shaped kind of the landscape of things like malware, things like ransomware, things like cryptocurrency mining attacks, for example. I'd be curious to know any sort of broader 10,000-foot view shifts that you've, in again your opinion, experienced or looked at and said, yeah, we can think about kind of the changes in the way that the attacks have happened over the last 5 or 10 years and what has come about as a result of those and the shaping of that based on cryptocurrency.
Uh-oh.
Oh no!
Bum, bum, bum. Wow.
It's kind of ironic. Just before we lost Rebekah, I was like, Rebekah's got to come back like every week, at least on one of our shows, and just share with us what our team's been finding and all that stuff.
Yeah, I've got another interesting quote.
Really enjoying this conversation.
Ask her about when she's.
We have to wrap it up
back.
pretty soon to get to stories, but
yeah. And refresh your page because I added some.
Okay.
So. Bump. Wow.
Right. I was the combo breaker there.
As soon as you asked her if she knew who the creator was, it was like Witsec. Gotta go.
Combo breaker.
I blame Paul.
I mean, I'm gonna need another drink before we start stories. Epic.
It's almost. Did she lose it? Oh, she's back. She's back.
Yeah.
We thought it was something we said.
Cryptocurrency miners. I have run.
It's still getting caught up. Hold on. It's buffering. It's buffering. Rebekah, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Good. Yeah, you were just when you first came back on, it was still like buffering, so it got a little choppy there. But it's nice to thank you.
Clearly, the crypto miner wasn't on a background process.
Yes,
had taken thread priority.
So, Rebekah, before you dropped, I was just curious to get your opinion on how the industry, especially the security industry, in reaction to the rise of Bitcoin has kind of changed. So, for example, based on your years of experience, what has things like cryptocurrency done to shape malware, to shape attacks from criminal organizations, and how has that shaped the industry as you see it?
So I think that
don't leave us.
Don't leave. Yeah. You froze there for a second.
And it was, I think that, don't leave us hanging.
So I think it shaped it, but I think it's not as significant as we might think. If you think prior to, Bitcoin, they would use things like the money packs and, the green dot and, the different ways that you can anonymously buy and send money. And so I think that cryptocurrency, like I said, has kind of made it easier for adversaries to monetize things, to monetize and get money directly. And so that it has actually taken over, I think, from the concept of like, let's steal debit and credit cards and use those, because banks actually got really, really good at fraud identification and prevention and things like that. And so it kind of has changed it because now that's easier. But I think that if banks hadn't gotten better at identifying those types of fraudulent transactions, we would still see more of those as well. So Bitcoin is kind of, I think, just the next phase in adversaries kind of trying to find ways to monetize their attacks.
The other quick one I've got, and again, maybe not fleshed out by some of the data that you've captured at Rapid7. Have you noticed any shift? Because one of the things that we speculated about some time back, seen any shift in the motive of some of the attacks after the OPM breach? Because we were very much of the opinion that we started to see different types of things start showing up. Because many of the folks, that was their end all be all, was that they wanted all of the federal government, U.S. federal government employee data, and then it was there and it was out in the open, and now all of these folks are, quote, out of a job and turn mercenary. So the rise in other types of things happened.
So I can see that. Some of the things that I think would be kind of questionable about that approach is that there are new employees. And there are new programs and new government agencies being stood up. They're hiring new people. And so I don't think an adversary would be like, cool, we've got everything, we're good. They would still need to kind of try and maintain some level of access or find ways to get similar types of information on new employees. Mm-hmm. We would actually see that a lot with industrial espionage. It's like they steal, the plans to the fighter jet. And you would think, well, they've got what they wanted for, they'll just stop now. But they needed to see, okay, are there any troubleshoots? Are there any new technologies? Or did something go wrong in testing that they had to address? They want a continual stream of access.
Yeah. What was the errata and what's the next new fighter jet?
Exactly. And so why I think there probably wasn't as significant a push, my guess would be getting that data from OPM was a significant investment in, person hours and resources. And so that they don't need to keep that same pace or tempo, but they're still definitely interested in getting similar types of data.
Interesting.
Rebekah, while you were rejoining our program, we talked about having you back every week to share your thoughts and insight in threat intelligence. So just a warning that you're probably going to get more requests to come on the show, as Rapid7 is this year a proud sponsor of a select number of our shows on the network. Very happy to have them. And thank you for agreeing to come on the show on short notice. We had an opening, and we're glad you could join us this evening. So thank you, Rebekah.
You're very welcome. I was happy to be here. It's probably the best birthday I've had.
Yeah.
Right on.
Lies.
We are honored.
Lies.
Go celebrate your birthday.
I spent one birthday at SEER school, so this is at least better than that.
Oh. I'd hope it's better than that.
Set the bar high.
Yeah.
No, we cleared it.
Rebekah, thanks for appearing on the program this evening.
Thanks.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back, talk about security news for this week. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.